this weekend, I took Deanna, our youngest, to a off-Broadway show called The Play That Goes Wrong. And it's actually really well done. It's won a bunch of awards. And the concept behind it is it's supposed to be a regular play, but everything imaginable goes wrong, and that's intentional. I'm not going to explain the play to you. But it's funny and it's well done. And in the midst of it, about 40% halfway through the play, thereabouts, off screen, or off stage, I should say, a murder takes place, and there are 3 loud gunshots that you hear. And I knew, the play that they're doing is called like the Murder at whatever place, Manor, Maversham Manor or something. And you knew something like this was coming. And those 3 gunshots rung out, and I flinched in like a very defined way. And I was like, oh, that's the kind of, for lack of a better term, shrapnel from what had happened Wednesday. Like that was somewhere in my brain. The last time I had heard something like that was when we were scurrying off the stage at the parade, and we heard a very distinct gunshot, and the Fox security folks, who I will continue to say what a brilliant job they did, said, "Get down." Somewhere in my brain that like really impacted and affected me. And so when I heard it again, even though I'm at a Broadway show and that's part of the show, I wasn't really expecting it. And my heart raced and I flinched, and it was weird. And I'm a near 40-year-old man who didn't see any of the actual shooting and didn't see any of the actual victims, and it had an impact on me. And so I have spent a lot of the time since the parade talking about us failing our kids and the young people who have had, preparing for these events and knowing what to do and all of that just be part of how they grow up. And I apologize that I'm kind of taking a circuitous path here, but I promise I'll land the plane. We have a couple different types of reactions to these types of incidents. If it's like the one in Kansas City, where it appears to be gang violence that spills out into what I would call the general population, outside of where we as a society have accepted that gang violence will take place, the reaction is throw the book at them, police the streets, keep the criminals in jail, all that stuff. And when it is the type of shooting that is very unique to America, the lone wolf, usually 17 to 28-year-old loner guy who, loses his mind or has been radicalized by the internet or, any of the above, we go to mental health. We say we need to do more on that front. And the mental health thing really, really irritates me because while, yes, I wish we had vastly more mental health resources, I find it wildly and offensively disingenuous to claim to care about mental health and want to prioritize that and not recognize the mental health damage we're doing to a generation of kids. If I, as a near 40-year-old man, was at a play 5 days later, and heard a couple obviously cinematic gunshots, and my heart raced and I flinched, what about the thousands of kids at that parade? What about them? And what does that do to their mental health? What does that do to their ability to be happy, healthy, well-adjusted kids? And the answer is it's now been a problem in America for long enough, and enough people have been a party to some type of mass shooting incident that tragically we might have the data to actually do a proper sample size study to see the mental health damage that active shooter drills and that being on the periphery, much less in the mix of a mass shooting incident, what it does to people. But claiming to care about mental health and then sticking your fingers in your ear and failing to recognize the damage this uniquely American epidemic has to do with mental health, or impacts people's mental health, I find offensive. And so I will admit I have very extreme feelings, and this is where people will get mad, and that's fine. People are allowed to disagree. I have very, very extreme feelings on guns in this country. I do not believe it to be a constitutional right. I do not believe that the way in my lifetime the Second Amendment has been understood and interpreted by the courts is correct, flatly. I think it is. I think the fact that we have totally disregarded the fact that the first 4 words of the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia. It is not well-regulated, and it is not a militia. The fact that we have just thrown that out, I think, is a crime. Okay? So I will admit, though, I am on the extremes there. I think it is a logical fallacy. I think that if we are really talking about if you believe the reason you have a right to an AR is because you must protect yourself against a tyrannical government, well then, shouldn't you then also have the rights to any weapons you can afford? Fully automatic machine guns, drones, smart bombs. That's what the government's working with. If the government comes for you, they've got suitcase nukes, guys. And so if we're going to take it to its furthest logical conclusion, and it is our inalienable rights to be able to take on the first infantry if they come for us, well then nukes at trade shows to go along with tanks if you can afford it, right? And I don't think many people actually believe we have those rights. So I think the Second Amendment is consistently misinterpreted, but I've lost that argument. The courts have lost that, decided I've lost that argument. The politicians, even the politicians I support, have decided they don't want to have that argument. And the guns and the gun lobby and the gun owners have won that argument. So how do we move forward? And this is where I give Jason Kander and Laszlo credit for starting this conversation, which is, instead of adding a law, repealing a law. Because there is a law that was passed nearly 20 years ago, the PLCAA, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. And what that law did was make it illegal to sue gun manufacturers. It made it you you do not have the rights in America now to sue a gun manufacturer unless the gun malfunctions. And what that law has, in my opinion, and again, Jason Kander wrote an article about this, did podcasts about it, and people should check it out. It has allowed the gun manufacturers to operate in an area somewhat outside of capitalism, where they do not have to put in the protections or safeguards that every other industry does, because they don't have to be worried about being held to account in a multi-billion-dollar civil lawsuit. Now, removing this law would not guarantee anything. It wouldn't guarantee you would win your lawsuit. It wouldn't guarantee any of those things. But what it would do is guarantee that you would have a chance to find out, okay, are they marketing these guns to children through the discovery process of a lawsuit? Do they have smart gun technology that they easily could be implemented that they're choosing not to because it would cost an extra $12 a gun and they've decided not worth it? And so, to use an analogous situation, DeMonte, you're not old enough to remember this, but when I was around 18 years old, anybody, and I'm very, very, very fortunate that I didn't get hooked on this, anybody who wanted Oxy could get it. It was handed out like candy in at clubs, parties.
Like Advil at
Yes. Anybody that wanted Oxy could get it. It was that ubiquitous. And the reason, and it's the cause of the opioid epidemic, or a big cause of it, the reason that changed was because the opioid makers got sued into oblivion. They lost billions and billions of dollars in lawsuits. And because of that, they regulated themselves. And because my dream of a proper interpretation of the Second Amendment, that ship seems to have sailed. We are just going to pretend that there is nothing you can do when you just need to look to any other country in the world to see, well, there's obvious things you can do. And my dream of a gun buyback program and it not being legal for individual citizens to possess these types of weapons, that's gone. But without this law, would these gun companies start to operate in their own financial best interests and create their own gun registry and to enforce their own background checks? And Kander speculated they might create their own insurance companies about having to purchase your own gun insurance. They might, because the fear of being sued into oblivion because you knowingly and wantonly marketed these guns to kids, to people who you knew were mentally unstable, sold them to people with a history of domestic violence, all those things. If they just had to worry about being held to account, how much would that change things? How much would that change how they operate? Because what we know is that this will simply keep happening. And we will simply continue on the path of everyone at this point having either been on the receiving end or the, I guess, giving end of a wellness check. And it's a tragic state of affairs. And I'm going to tell one anecdote that I did not tell on the TV show. But I'm going to tell it now, and then we're going to move on. When I talk about what this is doing to our kids. And Demonze, I apologize on the front end. I don't know how this is going to impact or affect you. So yeah, I maybe should have told you this beforehand. So the parade happens Wednesday. And just put me on camera, please. The parade happens Wednesday. And again, we were fine, right? We were fine. We literally had security with us. We were fine. I am of the 800,000 people there were hundreds of thousands, I would say, in more danger than I was, okay? So this is not a woe is me. This is just, despite that, this is the impact it has on our people, especially our young people. So Deanna was staying with my mom. And, I sent the text before they had even seen the news. Demonze didn't even know yet. Dior didn't even know yet that it had happened. And I sent the text, we're fine. Because I did not want you guys to see the news and not be able to, not know what was going on. But your mom's phone hadn't been working great at the parade. And then when we got back to the hotel, your mom laid down, take a nap. And I called my mom and FaceTimed her. And your little sister, who's 10 years old, said, I was outside of the hotel. I was walking around. I pace when I'm on the phone. And your little sister said, hey, can I talk to mommy? And I said, nah, she's taking a nap. She said, no, let me talk to mommy. And I said, she's taking a nap. It's been a tough day. Sorry. She was like, oh, okay. And I was like, if she wakes up before, you go to bed, we'll call. And that was that. And then the next day, Deanna and I went to dinner. And she told me that when we got off the phone, she was worried that I was lying to her. That her mom had been shot, and I didn't want to tell her. And that, while is irrational from an adult's perspective, I get it. It is for whatever. And again, we were on the furthest periphery. But for kids, this is now something she carries. And if we are just okay that is going to be the world in which we live, then I don't even want to say so be it, because I'm not. But don't you fucking dare ever tell me again you care about mental health. You care about, the youth of America. Because we are opting into living like this. And acting as if there is no possible solution when every other developed country in the world has figured it out is not acceptable.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.